welcome back to the story for kids, Discovering the Bible from Beginning to End. Chapter 9, The Faith of a Foreign Woman. After Samson, the Israelites again started to sin and worship idols. A famine was going on in Judah, and no food would grow, so the people were always very hungry. A woman named Naomi and her family moved to the country of Moab, where there was food. But when they got to Moab, Naomi's husband died. Her sons got married in Moab to women named Oprah and Ruth. But then Naomi's sons died, and she couldn't live in Moab anymore. Back then, widows had to be cared for by male relatives. All of Naomi's relatives lived back in Israel. While Naomi was in Moab, she heard that the Lord had helped his people. He had begun to provide food for them again. So Naomi and her daughters-in-law prepared to go from Moab back to her home. She left the place where she had been living. Her daughters-in-law went with her. They started out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Naomi said to her daughters-in-law, "Both of you go back. Each of you go to your own mother's home. You were kind to your husbands who have died. You have also been kind to me. So may the Lord be just as kind to you. May the Lord help each of you find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them goodbye. They broke down and wept loudly. They said to her, "We'll go back to your people with you." But Naomi said, "Go home, my daughters. Why would you want to come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Go home, my daughters. I'm too old to have another husband. Suppose I thought there was still hope for me. Suppose I married a man tonight, and later I had sons by him. Would you wait until they grew up? Would you stay single until you could marry them? No, my daughters. My life is more bitter than yours. The Lord's power has turned against me." When they heard that, they broke down and wept again. Then Oprah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth held on to her. "Look," Naomi said, "your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." But Ruth replied, "Don't try to make me leave you and go back. Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Where you die, I'll die. And there my body will be buried. I won't let even death separate you from me. If I do, may the Lord punish me greatly." Naomi realized that Ruth had made up her mind to go with her, so she stopped trying to make her go back. The two women continued on their way. At last, they arrived in Bethlehem. Ruth, who was from Moab, spoke to Naomi. Ruth said, "Let me go back out to the fields. I'll pick up the grain that has been left. I'll do it behind anyone who is pleased with me." Naomi said to her, "My daughter, go ahead." So Ruth went out to a field and began to pick up the grain. She worked behind those cutting and gathering the grain. As it turned out, she was working in a field that belonged to Boaz. Just then, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem. He greeted those cutting and gathering the grain. He said, "May the Lord be with you." "And may the Lord bless you," they replied. Boaz spoke to the man in charge of his workers. He asked, "Who does that young woman belong to?" The man replied, "She's from Moab. She came back from there with Naomi." The young woman said, "Please let me walk behind the workers. Let me pick up the grain that is left." She came into the field. She has kept on working here from morning until now. She took only one short rest in the shade. So Boaz said to Ruth, "Dear woman, listen to me. Don't pick up that grain in any other field. Don't go anywhere else. Stay here with the women who work for me. Keep your eye on the field where the men are cutting the grain. Walk behind the women who are gathering it. Pick up the grain that is left. I've told the men not to bother you. When you are thirsty, go and get a drink. Take water from the jars that the men have filled." When Ruth heard that, she bowed down with her face to the ground. She asked, "Why are you being so kind to me? In fact, why are you even noticing me? I'm from another country." Boaz replied, "I've been told all about you. I've heard about everything you've done for your mother-in-law since your husband died. I know that you left your father and mother. I know that you left your country. You came to live with people you didn't know before. May the Lord reward you for what you've done. May the Lord, the God of Israel, bless you richly. You have come to him to find safety under his care." "Sir, I hope you will continue to be kind to me," Ruth said. "You have made me feel safe. You have spoken kindly to me, and I'm not even as important as one of your servants." When it was time to eat, Boaz spoke to Ruth again. "Come over here," he said. "Have some bread. Dip it in the wine and vinegar." She sat down with the workers. Then Boaz offered her some grain that had been cooked. She ate all she wanted. She even had some left over. Ruth got to pick up more grain. Then Boaz gave orders to his men. He said, "Let her take some stalks from what the women have tied up. Don't tell her she can't. Even pull out some stalks for her. Leave them for her to pick up. Don't tell her she shouldn't do it." So Ruth picked up grain in the field until evening. Then she separated the barley from the straw. The barley weighed 30 pounds. She carried it back to town. Her mother-in-law saw how much she gathered. Ruth also brought out the food left over from the lunch Boaz had given her. She gave it to Naomi. Her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you pick up grain today? Where did you work? May the man who noticed you be blessed." Then Ruth told her about the man whose field she had worked in. "The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz," she said. "May the Lord bless him," Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. "The Lord is still being kind to those who are living and those who are dead," she continued. "The man is a close relative of ours. He's one of our family protectors." Then Ruth, who was from Moab, said, "He told me, he even said, stay with workers until they finish bringing in all the grain." Naomi replied to her daughter-in-law Ruth. She said, "That will be good for you, my daughter. Go with the women who work for him. You might be harmed if you go to someone else's field." Naomi replied to her daughter-in-law. So Ruth stayed close to the woman who worked for Boaz as she picked up grain. She worked until the time when all the barley and wheat had been harvested, and she lived with her mother-in-law. Boaz continued to be kind to Ruth. Because he was a close relative, he took care of Ruth and Naomi. He made arrangements to marry Ruth. So Boaz married Ruth. The Lord blessed her so that she became pregnant, and she had a son. The woman said to Naomi, "We praise the Lord today. He provided a family protector for you. May this child become famous all over Israel. He will make your life new again. He'll take care of you when you are old. He's the son of your very own daughter-in-law. She loves you. She's better to you than 7 sons." Then Naomi took her child in her arms and took care of him. The woman living there said, "Naomi has a son." They named him Obed. He was father of Jesse. Jesse was father of David. Discussion questions. Do you share things with your friends? What types of things do you share? When was the last time you shared? Do you have a friend you can rely on when you have problems? What makes that person trustworthy? Can that friend rely on you too? Number 3. Have you ever given up something to help a friend? What happened?